opinions, you think about it, we rant about it. Listen to us live on Facebook.
Hello, everybody. It is Friday, July 2nd, post-Canada Day, pre-4th of July. And you know what? It's been a fabulous couple of days. And I got to tell you, the news is just rip-roaring about all kinds of crazy crap. And I'm very curious to see what my partner in crime, David Solomon, wearing the Habs shirt just below the T-shirt, right? They're
Absolutely.
down 1-0, and tonight's
no, sorry, 2-0. Sorry, buddy. Got to give them all support. They're down 2-0, and tonight's game 3. And all of us here in Montreal, or at least most of us real fans, are excited and can't wait and hope that we can bring the cup back to where it belongs here in Montreal.
Ooh, how many cups are there?
We've had 24.
You know, there's so many haters out there. You know, it's unbelievable. My stepson goes to me and says, "Hey, you know, they've been losers since '93," and I'm like, "Okay, and all right, let's get to the buzz." You know, David, I'm going to let you take off. My name's Stuart Brisgell, and I'm going to flank. I'm going to let David go ahead.
All right, well,
relax.
Well, first, folks, again, let's get the stupidity out of the way. Go Habs, go. Let's go. Let's hope we win tonight. And I want to thank all those people who nagged me. I know I had a terrible background. Really appreciate you forcing me to clean it up a little bit. This is my wife's mess, not mine. So I had to clean up some of it. So please note the mensch on the bench behind me over here. He's kind of watching over me today. So let's talk about it. Anyways, listen, I got rid of the mundane and the stupid because I want to get into the really, really difficult part. Now, I've been ranting about this for a little bit, and as someone who is as a minority in Canada, I look at what has happened to the Indigenous population in Canada, and as a first generation and learning it in school, when you learn it in school, the winner teaches you history. And when the winner teaches you history, it's not exactly as it was because it has to be angled towards them. And the ugly face has reared its head, as you've heard of the last while. And again, this week it happened. About 1,200 bodies have now been found in 3 different residential schools across this country. 2 in BC, 1 in Saskatchewan. And there are countless more, which is really sad to say. And what's interesting about the Indigenous community of Canada is that they've been saying all along that they want some form of reconciliation. They want to move on. Now, these residential schools have been around since the beginning of Canada. The notion behind these residential schools, just to give you an idea as a little reminder, was to educate the uncultured natives of Canada. That was the mindset that was set up by the government back in 1867. Hence, yesterday being Canada Day, our founding as a country. We're not our Independence Day, the founding as a country. And as you go forward, what you find out is all of a sudden for over 125 years, listen to what I'm saying, over 125 years, these schools were running. And what happened was that these children were abused, beaten because they weren't listening. Many died and were buried, and their parents were told, "Hey, what do we know? Your kid ran away. We don't know where they are." Many are still suffering post-trauma from being in these residential schools. And here we are coming to Canada Day. Canada Day being yesterday, which is normally, up until last year, a big celebration. Last year, COVID, just like in the United States, couldn't do very much. This year, there was an ability to do something. And unfortunately, with what transpired, the saddest part was that the country doesn't feel like celebrating like it used to, right? We're in a somber mood because governments, federal and provincial, churches, Catholic, Protestant churches, absolutely destroyed Native Canadian lives, destroyed them. And here we are in 2021 asking ourselves, what do we do? Here's the problem. The Native community of Canada doesn't go and say Native lives matter. They say all child lives matter. Imagine mindset, right? Over centuries of devastation, they want to be part of the greater Canadian society. They do not want to turn this about them, although they do need reconciliation. It's not really where this is going. And they didn't say, let's go cancel Canada Day celebrations. We need to talk. And the month of June was a matter of talking. But of course, cancel culture, which we know came out of the United States, decided to rear its ugly head in Canada. And of course, let's cancel Canada Day rally. That's what it is. Shame on Canada. we need to cancel Canada Day. Oh, come on. And of course, our Prime Minister, Mr. Sit on the Fence, Mr. Apology, what did he do? You know, hemming and hawing. The left loves this. The right is saying, going, wait a minute. We have veterans who fought for this country, who fought for its freedom, and it needs to be recognized. Nope, they say cancel. Once again, we're talking about cancel culture who wants, and the right, led by Aaron O'Toole, has said, frankly, he fought for Canada and doesn't believe in canceling, modifying, not canceling. That, unfortunately, has become the attitude. The Canadian government does need to take responsibility for what has happened, which was mostly run by Liberal governments, but the Conservative governments in the past also have a responsibility. Provincial governments have a responsibility. Other churches have responsibilities. I've mentioned that several times, but that's not the point over here. The vast majority of Canadians, folks, do not want to cancel Canada Day. They want to celebrate something. Many came here from countries where life was horrifying, and they would like to celebrate their freedom. The left doesn't want you to. The left wants you to suffer. The left wants you to be blamed, like me. Remember the white-skinned guy from last week? I talked about this. I'm to be blamed for the residential schools. I should be ashamed to be a Canadian today. Not this Canadian, a Canadian born and raised in Canada. I'm a first-generation Canadian, and it's my fault what happened to the Indigenous population. You will never, ever hear that. I've had conversations with folks in the Indigenous communities. When my kid used to play hockey, we met families from the Indigenous populations, and they do not sit and blame me and others. They blame the establishments. They blame the churches. They blame, and they say, let's move on. They don't want to dwell. They want to move on. They want to be better established, better resources, better conditions in life. They live in squalor, high suicide rates, high alcoholism. I talked about this last week. And yet the Canadian government, we don't want to talk. We need action. The underlying thing, Stuart, and with this I'm going to wrap up, is cancel culture is a cancer, nothing more than that. What they're trying to do is to shame you into believing that you're at fault for what our ancestors did. And the quick history lesson is every country was built on some form of racism. We need to stop dwelling on it. We need to learn from it and move on. We need to celebrate when we do something right, and we need to learn from our mistakes from the past. Stop canceling. Let's move on.
Okay, so I got to jump in here. And you know what, David? Don't take my history line, because that's what I normally do. I feel compelled on giving history lessons because I love history. And, I'm wrong half the time, but at least I can admit that too.
Then how can you give a lesson if you're wrong half the time, buddy?
Yeah, well, because history is wrong half the time. It was actually a joke. Yeah, listen, it's very sad, very tragic. Is it the government's fault that these kids died, or is it the organization, or is it the organization that ran these schools?
No,
Who's
it's a
responsible?
Stuart, all the government levels were responsible because they organized it. What they did is they allowed the churches to run it. The governments organized it. There was no. By the way,
stop for a second. No. You don't know where I'm going with this, David. Let me go. Let me run, David. The government had great intentions on creating an organization. Now, you're saying a church. Well, we don't know if it's a church, but let's say, for example, it was a church that ran it.
Stuart, we know that the Catholic Church and the Protestant churches ran them across Canada. There are no denials here, Stuart.
Right. So Protestant and Catholic churches. But I'm just saying there may be other organizations that were running these things, right? We don't know.
Education was run by the churches up until the 1960s, and then the government took it over, especially in Quebec.
The Protestants were correct, but
no. You see where I'm going. Stuart. The government mandated the churches to run it across the country. Let's just get it started from the beginning. There's no denial. No one's denying that, except for the Catholic, except for the Pope. No one's denying it.
Right. So let me continue. It's the same in sports, right? USA Swim has a club that has a coach who went undergoing training and did something really heinous. Is USA Swim responsible? I'm trying to break this down in a
Yes.
legal way. Hang on
Yes,
a
of
second.
course they are.
No. USA Swim is an organization. The government's an organization. They aren't the ones who physically abuse these kids.
I'm
It was
sorry,
the
Stuart.
individual
They knew-
church, isn't it?
Stuart,
Like, where does the
Stuart,
blame go?
Stuart. The government set them up knowing exactly what they were doing. No one is denying this, and I'm not on the left. That's the thing.
Okay.
No one has denied this, Stuart. You're coming across without the facts.
100%. I'm just looking at the surface. Like, again, it's a tragedy. There's no arguing this. It's a tragedy. It's a total tragedy. But who do you point the blame at is where I'm having the issue.
Stuart, the churches, when they ran these organizations, we know, listen, my father-in-law told me back when he was in high school in the late 50s here in Montreal, that if someone was out of line, they got a strap, right? That was the norm back in those days. My generation, you and I both didn't grow up getting, a belt or a strap. I got a chalk thrown at my head by a teacher, but that was about as far as it went. Today, you can't even touch a kid. But back in those days, physical abuse was a form of discipline. But they took it so far that they absolutely killed the kids. And the churches are sitting now with a tail between their hands, and the governments are sitting here going, they organized this.
Right. So the government organized it, and the individual churches that were involved executed it. No disrespect using that word. But what I'm trying to say, David, is like you had in the United States and around the world, the Catholic priests that were fondling little boys, and that the church was complicit, or in this case, on burying and hiding it. I'm trying to get to this point, right? And you keep interrupting me. So here you have these little churches all over the country who are abusing these kids, right? Totally wrong. But the question is, was the government aware of the bodies being buried? You want to blame the government, right? And that's dismantling the democracy, right? Are you blaming the government? So in the case in the United States of the Boston Catholic Church, right? Very famous. It was the Catholic Church that actually knew about it and tried moving these pastors and priests around. Was the Canadian government aware of the murders?
Stuart, you're comparing, I'm sorry to say, apples to oranges, because the Catholic churches and what they did in Boston, and it's quite famous, was not a government institution. This was established.
Well, the church is a form of a government, by the way.
No. Okay, but irrelevant. But the Massachusetts state legislature has no idea what's going on inside a church. The Canadian government established these institutions, and because churches ran education, they let them. They knew exactly what was going on. They had no problem with it. And I'm not trying to sound like a leftist here right now blaming and this and that. This was the era. I talked about that. Like, listen, like I said, my father-in-law's classroom in 1950s, at Barron Bing High School, someone got a strap because you went out of line. That was the norm. But the norm went further out because they believed that abusing them and murdering them was okay. And that was the mindset back 100 years
When was the last time that someone actually died
as a result? We don't know, but the last residential school was closed in the 1990s. So we're talking about something that was, something that only closed down around 25 years ago.
Okay, so those people are still alive. So why aren't they looking around those churches?
They are looking, Stuart, they've actually begged the government for money to help find these bodies, and the government has refused. The Liberal government knows it's going to cost millions, and it's going to be a shame. There's a federal election going to be called very soon, and Trudeau will not allow this scandal, and this might be the scandal that brings him down. He will not permit the money to be allocated to the natives so that they can go find their families that have been dead for over a century. It's vile.
It is.
It's vile.
Okay. Should I send a thing of black shoe polish to Prime Minister Trudeau?
You could send him whatever you want, but at the end of the day, Stuart, we have a situation here. My whole point of this whole thing was that cancel culture isn't helping the situation.
Right, because cancel culture is trying to dismantle the democracy. Risa here posted a note, and she's 100% right. All of these types of arguments, are trying to dismantle the democracy. Democracy is not perfect. There's no country that exists in the world that hasn't been created without a war, blood, death. I mean, that's how they're all created.
Racism, whatever. I mean, you can go back. I did this with my kids. It doesn't make a difference.
The American immigration form, just so you know, which has nothing to do with this conversation, used to say white, non-Mexican.
By the way, the Canadian census form asks you, if you want to answer, your race and your religion. And listen, they want to know, and we're being told, put it in, because otherwise money isn't going to be allocated to the cultural communities because they need to know who's around. Democracy is a flaw. Listen, I'm a political science major. Every political system is flawed, period.
Oh, yeah.
But what 100%. I'm saying here is, and with this we wrap up, Stuart, is what happens here in this country cannot be ignored and should not be ignored. But
what are we talking about on Monday? Because you still have the whole broadcast.
Shut up a minute. Let me finish. My point is that the Canadian government, the churches, the federal, the provincial governments now have a responsibility to clean up the mess of their predecessors and to help society move forward and help the natives really with what their issues. It's really time, but not cancel Canada Day. And I hope they don't suddenly come around and cancel July 4th celebrations, because God knows who's coming up with cancel culture. Monday, folks, Monday. We don't know. The weekend is always filled with stuff. We don't know. But something? There's always something to do with news, politics, entertainment, society, education, business. Gotta wait till Monday to hear what we got to do. Folks, we love you. We thank you so much for joining us this week. It's been a blast, and we hope
it's been a sad. Listen, this week has been probably the saddest and hardest broadcast, with the tower down in Surfside.
Yep.
These homeschools. I mean, it's a pretty sad time in history, and society will, and Bal, I mean, it's going to fix itself, and it's going to come to an end. But with every ending is another beginning.
Correct.
And unfortunately, it took 250 years to make United States what it is, and it could take 25 years to undo everything that it took to make. I wish everyone a very safe and happy and healthy weekend. Like you, David, I hope even though I live in Florida, I hope the Montreal Canadiens do turn around at least one game. I would rather, it's not looking too good.
Hey.
Statistically, the Canadiens are probably the only team that could actually do it. But
move on, Stuart. We gotta go. Gotta go.
You know what? I'm going to hit the end.